I'm Dave, and there's John holding the new Blade 200 SRX helicopter with safe technology. The safe technology is provided by the Spectrum AR636H 6-channel receiver with AS3X and DSM and DSMX. The helicopter features a panic recovery switch, 3 safe-enabled flight modes, and brushless main rotor and tail rotor motors. The tail rotor motor is a BLH 2022 and it's a 5100 kV. The main rotor motor is a 1516 and it's a 3900 kV. The main motor and the tail motor are controlled by a BLH 2024 dual brushless ESC. Cyclic control is provided by 2 geared rotary servos. Wires for the 2 servos and the main ESC motor control and the tail rotor ESC motor control plug into the back of the receiver. The battery provided with the helicopter is a 3-cell 11.1 volt 800 milliamp hour lithium polymer battery with a 3C maximum charge rate. It says it has a 30C 24 amp maximum continuous discharge. These batteries here also work, and I just happen to have some laying around that I use for other projects, and that's the Hobby King Nanotech 950 milliamp hour battery, and it has a 25 to 50C discharge rate. The connectors on the 2 batteries are very similar. Both have the same type of balance plug and both have the same JST connectors. The Hobby King wires are a little bit longer. So here's the manual that came in the box. Now my helicopter did not come with a radio since it was the bind and fly. I decided to set up my DX6i as my radio. I looked in the manual at the chart that gave configurations for switch settings, and just about every radio, every Spectrum radio was listed except the DX6i. So I looked on the site and found that another user had the same problem, and he had posted a list of how to set up the DX6i. So I went through that according to his instructions. I made the gear switch the beginner mode when it's off, and then intermediate mode when it's on. This would be the panic switch, which is the flap switch. If I go forward, that's panic mode. Then, if I want to go expert, I would go ahead and flip the mix switch, and that would give me expert mode, overriding the gear switch. Then I took the helicopter with this radio out and gave it a test in all 3 modes, and plus checked the panic mode. We're going to start out on beginner mode and see if it'll even fly in beginner mode. Alright, it's up in the air. This is beginner mode. It is not very reactive in beginner mode. So I'm trying to pull it back right now. I'm trying to go backwards. And I couldn't really go backwards in beginner mode. The wind just kept blowing it. Oh yeah. Now I got to fly it in about 75% throttle. But it's more reactive now, and I'm able to fly it. It will go backwards. It will go forward. Still in intermediate mode. Like I said, I tried beginner, but it just didn't really do it. Alright, let's throw the panic switch. Alright, there's the panic switch. Now I have no control. No control, except for the throttle. So I can't do anything but move the throttle. Alright, let's take it out of panic mode. Alright, now I have control again. So that was that. Okay, let's bring it in. I'm going to start. Now I'm only going to go to about 50% throttle because any less than that it just falls out of the air. Whoop. Okay, there's a little. Yeah, well, I almost hit the cameraman there. That was unplanned. But as you can see, it's very resilient. Nothing broke on it. And of course, the little brushless motor here, if it stops, it doesn't hurt the motor. Basically, the only thing I've ever broke on this was this main gear. If you stop the rotors too quickly, it could chip a tooth out of the main gear because there's a metal gear rubbing against that, and the metal gear chips the plastic gear. But other than that, that's easy to change. So the main gear is very easy to change. Really, all you have to do is just lift up these servo arms as such, and then remove the one screw that's underneath here, and then while holding up the shaft, just push down on the gear and it'll come right out, and then you can just put the new one in. I don't want to get too involved on a box opening or anything like that, but inside the box, if you get the Ready to Fly, you'll have a radio in the bottom, and the radio has dip switches that you can configure for this model. Unfortunately, it doesn't have any model memory, so if you want to switch to a different model, you have to reset these dip switches. Also in the box, if it's a bind and fly, you'll get all the other things that the Ready to Fly has, such as there's a charger here and a wall adapter for the charger. The battery is right here that I showed you earlier. And of course the helicopter and a few very limited spare parts, such as some upper linkages, a screwdriver and an Allen wrench, and some a bind plug and some sticky parts to put on the battery and such. Now you may want to purchase some additional parts from Horizon Hobby, and you can find those parts in the accessories tab underneath your model. One of the parts that I found to be very good to have is the main rotor gear right here. This is prone to getting the teeth chipped from the little metal gear that joins it, so if you purchase a couple of these, they're only about $6, you'd probably be well off. There's also some lower linkages here that aren't provided, so you might want to get a couple of them. And then there's some rods here that go to the tail boom to support it, and that's a good thing to have because they can break. Also, there's main rotor blades, but I've never actually damaged them. It seems like the gear strips out before the blades go. Now, one thing about this helicopter is when you're getting ready to fly, you have to turn on the radio and then plug in the battery, and at that point put the cover on. Well, that seems to be a little bit of a hazard because your throttle could get bumped and the thing could spin up while you're doing all this. So we've already made one mod to it, and John has come up with a little idea of a switch, a very little switch back here that taps into the voltage to the receiver right here. So when you plug in the battery, the ESC will be powered, but it won't run because it's not getting any signal from the receiver, which is not yet initialized with a switch off. So then once you're ready to fly, you can just sit it down and flip this switch and it'll finish the initialization. Instead of interrupting the power to the receiver, you could also put a switch between the two plugs here, making a little adapter with a switch on it to go between these two plugs. But we found that the switch we had for this type of current would be a lot heavier and take up more room and make it hard to get the cover on, so we just decided to go this route. And I'll put a little movie at the end of this movie to show how John built this and installed it. Trying to see if I can go back and forth a little. Now I'm full throttle again just to get it to back up in the air. Now I'm doing my rudder just to get it around. Oh. Yeah, I hit the rudder. I hit the rudder hard and gave it a little forward on the cyclic just to stop the travel. So that's my trick right now. If it starts drifting away, I just turn against the drift. Like I'm drifting sideways now, so I can turn against that drift, give it a little forward angle to stop it. Oh, there's a dragonfly up there with me. A real dragonfly. Not one of them fake electronic ones. Okay, here we come back. I'm giving it a little forward. You can see it travels along pretty good. Now, I reversed with the rudder and gave it a little forward again to slow it down. Same thing here. Give it about 75% throttle just to keep it in the air. And that's what I've heard from others that have flown these, that it does take a lot of throttle.
I got the switch mounted on there. I had it wired up wrong initially on the receiver, but I fixed it now. And it works great. So I did have to try a bunch of different glues to try to get that working. Eventually I finally found the CA and got it working there. But it's ready to go.
Alright, so we're going to test John's switch mod here. And I've got the radio on, I've got the battery plugged in, but the switch isn't on. So that means the receiver is not working, which also has the safe technology in it, the AS3X. So that's not working right now until we turn on that switch. So I'm going to go down here. And John, you might want to come on this side. Okay. I'm going to flip on the switch and let the receiver initialize. It's beeping right now. Going through its initialization. Okay, it should be ready. Here we go. Find out what happens. Okay, it looks like it still works.
It's a little wobbly though.
Yeah, it's a little wobbly. That's because I was full throttle. I was full throttle on it, so. This is an intermediate mode, by the way. Alright, there it is. Switch mod works.
And technically you should be able to hit the switch first, then unplug it too.
Should I turn it off now and see what happens?
Yeah.
Alright, I'm going to see what happens when I just turn the switch off. Alright, I turned it off. Now the receiver is deactivated.
And the ESC is still on, but it's not getting a signal to do anything.
Since the receiver is off, we can turn off the radio.
Yeah.
Because the receiver is not talking to the radio anymore. Now the only thing on is the ESC, but it's not getting a signal.
So therefore it won't even try to throttle up.
So it won't try to throttle up, so now I can just unplug the battery.
Yeah.
And that's it. So that's the switch mod.